Welcome to the Adapt Performance Podcast, the podcast that lets you delve into the minds of world-class guests all involved in the pursuit of performance. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Hope you're all well. I just wanted to hop on here and give you a quick introduction to today's podcast just to set the scene a little bit. So the thought process behind the Adapt Performance podcast is to bring you interesting topics by interesting guests. But I couldn't get any of those guests for today, so I've got Josh Fletcher instead. I'm joking. This podcast is absolutely unreal, okay? So this episode, Josh talks through his career, and it's a really colourful career at that. It's been a little bit of here, a little bit of there. He's been everywhere, okay? And we spend a good amount of this podcast speaking through his thought processes when he realised that he's going to do the strength and conditioning for the Special Forces in Romania, so what was that planning process like? And then we get into the actual nitty-gritty of how he actually approached the performance problems of dealing with, a big team with 200 soldiers at his disposal, in front of him and not a lot of equipment. And, essentially how he managed those relationships to get some really strong outcomes and solve the performance problem. We then kind of gravitated more towards the communication and relationship side of things. We both shared a few mistakes of our own. Hopefully you can kind of benefit from a few of those lessons that we had to learn the hard way. But ultimately, it's just a really strong episode speaking through a topic that I think is really, really interesting. I don't know anybody else that's done strength and conditioning for Special Forces. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hope you all enjoy it. Afternoon, Josh. Thanks for coming on, mate. How are you?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. I'm good.
Awesome. Cool. I'm looking forward to this, mate. I've sold it really, really well to everybody, and I'm sure you're not going to disappoint. It's going to be good. So the pressure's there, mate. So how about you give me and the listeners a little bit of a background on yourself, mate, where you've been, what you've done?
Yeah. Okay. So I always think it's important to start with who I am as a person. So I've got a 2-year-old boy who's absolutely bonkers. He's at that age where he's just running around trashing everything at the moment. A lot of fun to be around, but it's incredibly tiring and exhausting. From a large family, I've always had a sense of adventure and always wanted to move, live, work abroad, get outside, whatever people like to call whatever a comfort zone is. I really need kind of challenge, adventure, growth. And I've always really wanted to choose my path and my life myself. Like I said, come from a big family, kind of spent quite a lot of time raising myself. So it became a little bit feral, I suppose. And then I think I pretty much left home around 18, having spent quite a few years, like I said, raising myself prior to that. That's a bit of me as a person. Professionally, I suppose because of who I am as a person, I'd always wanted to move, live, work abroad. So I got into strength and conditioning quite late, about 26. Then I was lucky enough to jump straight in with the EIS internship, having personal trained for a while. And then kind of that ran its course. I was with the EIS in the early stages. I got made redundant. / shit canned, so it's somewhere in between the two. I then managed to get a job with Rotherham Rugby and did a 2 to 3 seasons there, which was a bit of a baptism of fire, really. EIS was a nice easy entry, believe it or not, for that. That was pretty savage. And then I kind of burnt out, hit the wall at about 31, and I looked at myself and just decided I didn't want my life to be like this anymore. Within 3 weeks of making that decision and just absolutely kind of taking my blinkers off, realizing I wasn't where I wanted to be in my life and where professionally as well, I had thrown my hat into the ring for a bunch of jobs overseas. I had 3 interviews within 2 weeks of being back from that holiday. I had 3 job offers within 3 weeks. I had accepted one and I was on the plane to India within 5 weeks of making that decision, taking those blinkers off. So I did a year out in India. Then that kind of, again, ran its course. And then I did 3.5 years out in Romania with the Special Forces there with Exos. That contract ended, so that was the end of that period of time, came to an end. Then in 2020, what we're now 2022, so 2021, back end of 2020, moved over to France. So I now live in Lyon, and I work for Hinter. So my first year was in motorsport with Formula 2, and now I work with a Formula 3 driver. So he lives up the road in Paris, so I go up and down to Paris quite regularly, and then I'm just on the road with him to the races as well. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour for my life and career, I guess.
Hey, that's a fair bit. How old are you, Josh, if you don't mind me asking?
30 plus a little bit of tax, so
yeah,
37. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, you've done a lot, mate. Like it's cool to see the different directions you've gone. It's a little bit off the trodden path, I guess you could say. And I think the thing that really interests me about that is I want to dig into the special forces stuff. I guess in university and all the stuff you kind of read around strength and conditioning, it's always, design a program for a football player, a netball player, rugby, all those things. So what was your initial kind of thought process when they said, right, you've got the job, you're going to be working with special forces in Romania? What was going through your head in that instance?
Well, add into that my brief, which was you could have between 180 and 350 people, and you'll be in sole charge of them. And I say, okay, what support do I have? You'll have support for 8 weeks and then nothing. Okay. What else do I need to do? You need to prep them and prepare them for. So I'm just trying to work out how much I should be shitting myself with these questions. And each time it's just going up and up. They were like, you're going to have between 150 and 350. We can't tell you until you get on the ground. I'm like, okay. And then they say, I say, all right, what facilities have I got? They're like, well, we don't know. You'll find out when you get on the ground. I'm like, this has gone up a little bit. Okay, what support am I going to have? You're going to have 8 weeks, and you're going to have a few extra staff with you for those first 8 weeks, and you're going to have nothing. Okay, what is it I've got to do? You've got to prepare them for selection. What does selection entail? Well, have you seen the program Who Dares Wins? Well, it's like that, but a bit more violent. Like shit myself level goes up. Well, okay. Then I said, right, what equipment, resources, facilities, etc. You're going to have pretty extensive facilities, resources, but we don't know where they're going to be. Right, okay. And they showed me some pictures of a military base, and where those tanks are parked now, like we could put a gym there. Like, right, okay. This is just what I was told prior, and I thought it just kept changing, and I didn't actually get the job until I didn't sign a contract or anything until 12 hours before I was supposed to be there. But to be fair, India had prepped me for all of this. That was just wacky, and everything that you think you know about controlling the controllables is totally gone and out the window. So I was absolutely fine with it all. I was just like, okay, I'm going to build this plan, build the structure, and it has to be flexible, and it has to account for variables, and it's the it's the ultimate in undulation and seeing what happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that sounds mad, mate. It just sounds super reactive, and I imagine that's what it was. It's hoping that your skill set and your ability to be adaptable will kind of, get you through. You saying that you're going to have 300 men to be in charge of there, it just reminded me of a Leonidas and the 300 Spartans, and that explains the beard you've got going on at the moment, mate. It's appropriate. So with that then, I literally know nothing about special forces, mate, so I'm going to get educated here, which is cool. How did you approach the actual S&C side of it? So, usually in a strength and conditioning standpoint, we'd approach a new sport with a needs analysis. We'd kind of see what they need to do from a movement perspective, energy systems, all that stuff. We'd then kind of do a testing battery, put an intervention or a training program in place, and then retest. Is that the same for special forces, or is that just way out the window?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I'll backtrack a little bit about my mentality and prep before going in. I suppose I should have mentioned this before for some context. I'm non-military, so I thought about this in terms of levels of respect. So I understood that in a lot of countries in the East that you start on zero for respect, or I placed myself on zero. And I'm non-military, so that's -1. I'm obviously not on special forces, so that's -2 because I'm non-military. I don't speak the language, so I'm on -3. And I'm a contractor, which aren't really looked upon overly favourably by them, by a lot of military personnel. So I'm on -4 for respect before I even go in. I thought, what on earth am I going to do here? And I was equally as worried about the US side as I was. That's who I was kind of contracted by. I was equally as worried about those guys as I was the Romanians. And so I just kind of made this decision that I actually did some communication work before I started, and when I just started on, I knew that I had a tendency to waffle. I had this preconceived idea that military was just blunt, concise, to the point, bang, 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 and largely that's true, based on what I'd seen in films and radio contact and all this sort of thing. And so I did some work, some NLP work prior to starting, so that I was really clear that how I needed to communicate with different people and what I needed to change before I arrived. But one of the most valuable things was just literally I shut up. Like for the first 6-8 weeks, like nobody knew a thing about me because no one asked, but they don't mind talking. And I would just keep asking questions, keep asking. And the opinion was good. I think people had a good opinion of me in the early stages before we did the training. And I think that came down to the fact that I would listen a lot more than I would talk, especially the people that I was working with. And I would ask them questions about their friends, their families, all these sorts of things, and get to know them. And not a single person asked me anything about myself. And it got to like 10 weeks in, and someone was like, where are you even from? Like, what is it? You know, you've got what? 2 brothers and a sister. All right, where do they live? Or what do they do? You know, it gets further down the line. But my mentality was to put all of that first and absolutely just pipe down and just see what the environment needed from me before I was going to say, this is what we need to do. I needed to learn. I need to become a student of the environment, of the people, and do that really, really quickly. I was lucky enough to be living with a bunch of retired special forces guys. I say lucky in the early days, and then that took its toll later down the line. 3 years living with dudes who are riddled with PTSD, broken bodies, broken minds, physically, mentally, emotionally, just shot to pieces. And that takes its toll that has a knock-on effect because they're such powerful characters. So I suppose that's my approach before. And then when we get in, I mean, it's important to do some sort of assessment. It's no different to any other sport. If you're not assessing, you're guessing. So we needed to do something. It very much comes down to what they had done, what they had experienced. And we needed this project to work because it was the first time that it had ever been done anywhere else in the world. Never been done before. And it was really important that it worked and it was a success and that we could show metrics and measurements. But then you think about, right, how am I going to, what assessments can I do with, I've got no equipment. As I knew it, I had absolutely zero. By the time we actually began, we had one Connex container, which you see like a beaver fit, which has got some rigging on the outside. We had 5 tons of weight discs, 8 Olympic bars, one green foam roller about that big that if you sat on it would dip in the middle. So pretty much all of that was useless apart from the weight discs, because we had enough of those. The bars we didn't touch because there was only 8 of them for what turned out to be 190 people. And then we used the pull-up bars, and all the rest of it was just sticks and movement skills. So, okay, what testing, what assessment can I do on a group of 180 people, 190 people it was, that is repeatable, that is relevant, that is consistent, that it was all down to variables, down to time, and down to resource. So we just did a carbon copy of what the US military system had used for many years. They moved away from it now, but we did the classic physical fitness test, PFT, which was maximum pull-ups, strict form, overhand, maximum push-ups. So in this order: pull-ups, push-ups, then they did sit-ups for our sins, and then we did a 2-mile run, we did 3K, so pretty much the same. and then we totaled those numbers up, put it into a ranking or scoring system, and then scored everybody off that. So we wanted to move away from you being an absolute stud, getting gold standard 0, or being a runner and weak as a kitten. We wanted to get away from that, so we had to level that out. So we took our incoming metrics. We also did some variation. We couldn't do a FMS because there's just too many people, so we did a modified. We took 3 of the movements. I think it was overhead squat, shoulder mobility, and maybe inline lunge. I think we took 3 of them and then gave people a score based off that, and then implemented some change over time.
I think just going back to what you said at the beginning, mate, because I think before I lose it, I really like it, where essentially you went in for the first 6 to 8 weeks and your approach was purely like a research mission more than anything. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. You're going into this environment where you haven't got a clue what's going to go on. And I think just relaying that back to different university settings, sports team settings, I think if we were to get a new job, I think a lot of people would be like, right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to implement this, but you don't know what they've got already. So I think the fact that you did that is awesome. Sorry, mate, I just wanted to get that in.
No, I will caveat that by saying that they had nothing in. They had nothing before, like absolutely 0. So we did with my team, we had to create everything from scratch, and everybody was looking because they didn't even know what it was. They didn't know what good quality physical training was. So there's this large element of education and upskilling involved in it as well. And the fundamental thing was I watched and I learned and I listened from all the people that were above me and alongside me. And then I did my job with the guys who I was coaching, and I let the coaching do the talking. So bit by bit, the people who were alongside me as my colleagues and my superiors, they started to come and train a little bit. And at one point we had a colonel coming and joining in the training sessions, and he was sold on it. He loved it. And then he went and brought that to his unit when he got promoted, and these things start to spread. But yeah, it was a real interesting experience, but a massive learning curve in terms of how to communicate. And I think I did a reasonable job of managing and running the environment, especially in the early days. But creating something from scratch, which doesn't exist, is it was really quite a lot of fun, actually. I really, really enjoyed it.
Would you say that was an easier task of creating something from scratch than, coming into an environment that already had like preformed superstitions and like systems that did or didn't work? Would you say that was an easier job?
Well, there's people within the system that had trained, or they thought they knew what they were doing. There was people who had done their CrossFit and all this sort of stuff. But really there was just a lack of understanding as to what high quality physical training was, or performance-based training, should I say, because they'd never done it before. And that's not their fault. It's not ingrained in their system. And ever since the fall of communism, which was actually very professional, ever since that, the things have just kind of slid downhill. So when they came back in and they were like, holy shit, it feels like we're back in the day. In a lot of ways, they were like, okay, I can really kind of see where this is valuable. So yeah, it was an interesting ride, I have to say.
So with that then, in terms of the special forces then, and this is me knowing literally nothing about it. So what do they actually have to do in terms of, what is their job on the battlefield, or is it composed of different kind of, players or personnel? Like, how does that work?
So they normally operate within a team, and it depends on which nation as to how big your team is. So some will have a 12-man team, and each team tends to have a speciality. So, for example, in the US, they might have a mountain team, a desert team, desert group, and a group is made up of loads of teams. So if there's a mission that involves them having to go into a certain place, which is more desert than mountain, then they would send the desert team. If there was something a bit more, water-based, that's when the SEALs go in, and, all these different things. So a lot of, the SEALs are obviously on land as well, but, there's all these different specialities within that. Then within the team, they have their specialities as well. So everybody has to be they're a master generalist, but there's always one thing that they are, they're renowned for. So one will be a medic, so a combat medic. So he's like trained up to a higher standard, and he's responsible for keeping everybody up to speed. Another person will be trained up in combatives and the physical training. His responsibility would be to take care of the team's training. Someone else is the weapons and demolitions expert. Someone else would be the navigation and communications expert. And everybody just has a slightly different speciality, but you have to be a minimum standard. And the minimum standards are just ridiculously high. So the minimum standard of every single thing they do would be considerably better than the best of just the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force.
Awesome. Yeah, that helps. Yeah, it's helping me get my head around like what they actually. I guess I'm just building a picture of this person in front of me or this team in front of me. What were some of the things you saw physically from them then? So was there any specific like benchmarks that you had in terms of physicality? And what did an average kind of special forces guy or girl look like?
Well, if you'd asked that question to about 15 years ago, you'd have had a very clear answer. So the guys that I lived with, they were retiring or they had just retired, and those guys, every single one of them, they're just like cookie cutter. They were no one was above 5'11". Nobody was more than 80. Well, some of them put a bit of weight on. Some of them would put a bit of weight on, but none of them were over 85 kilos. When they were trained, they were 85, almost bang on the nose. They were short, they were lean. They basically all had tattoos. They all had beards. They all had, they were just cookie cutter. And that was because they had to be able to do whatever it was that was required of them in all sorts of different environments to the level it needed to be done without fail. And if not, they were ruthless. You get chucked out the back. You get one warning. Then if you fail their assessment, each group has a slightly different assessment based on their needs. So if you're a little bit more mountain based, you've got to be able to walk up a bloody mountain. And if you can't walk up the mountains that they have as their set training exercises in certain time with X amount of kit, then you get one more chance. Then you're pretty much gone. Or they kick you off to physical training camp, which would be savage, no doubt. I'm talking about the US guys here. And then they would come back from that, and then they would go up the mountain again. Okay, you can come back on the team now, but don't ever do that again, or you're off, like you're out, and you won't be back in, kind of thing. So they're real strict on it. And we used to talk about it. The only real essentials that there's. It sounds a bit silly, but the physical training and the navigation skills were the two kind of fundamental things that absolutely always had to be in place. You can teach somebody how to shoot to a minimum standard. You could teach somebody how to do all the other things they needed to do to a minimum standard. But if literally you are so fatigued, you're so tired, you're so weak that you can't carry your mate out of combat, or you can't walk up a mountain to get to an extraction point, then you're risking everybody's life. And that's the way that they used to kind of think about things. So the physical training was just a non-negotiable. And that for me was really refreshing, especially with the US guys. With the Romanian guys, it wasn't quite there yet, that mentality, because it hadn't been ingrained really from their special forces was about 10 years old, and probably only really about 3 or 4 from a really formal perspective. The US guys have been doing this since the 60s, so had a lot of years getting it wrong and rehashing it, going again and again. So
that's cool. I think, yeah, mate, it's mad. It's really interesting to hear how it's kind of coming together for you. What was their, I guess, how does their week look then? So what are you having to kind of work around in terms of your physical training? Like how many times a week did you manage to train with them? And, what were they kind of having to do alongside that?
So I suppose it really depends on what we were doing. So the time of year. So I'll say straight off the bat that in the physical training is just a part of the machine. And at certain times of the year, think about this in terms of a team sport like rugby, for example. You can't be a back row player nowadays and not be, 100 kilos. It just doesn't fly. It doesn't cut it. So the physicality side of things is really important. In pre-season, you have this kind of sliding scale of like starts off quite highly physical demanding in terms of, you know, a bit more time away from the ball and a bit more time in the gym and, you know, conditioning. And then bit by bit, as the, you know, playing time gets closer, you make that transition. It's quite similar in terms of the modules that they had to do and how we would prepare them for those modules. So we had 189 recruits turn up, and their goal was to get through selection. So what's really important is a measure of success that I used. Yes, we're interested in the metrics, but the most important thing is that somebody would go through our 8-week training course and they would drop out for reasons relating to mental weakness and not physical weakness. So we would get them to a stage where they were fit enough to be able to handle what it was they needed to do. And that was very specific. I won't say what the metrics are, but we were really specific with exactly what they were. So it was walk X distance in X amount of time with X load on your back. And that's up and down. So that's what you had to be able to cover, which means you need to move at this speed, which means that we know that that's one of the metrics for the testing and evaluation section. So we can backtrack and reverse engineer that. We then know that where the vulnerable areas are because of loaded carrying, loaded walks, and that would be ankles, that would be lower backs, that would be knees. What is it we need to do to get them strong enough to be able to handle that? And that was our biggest metric, is how many people can we get there? How can we reduce our injury stats as much as we possibly can to ensure that we are putting the most amount of people into the pipe as possible? So we did our 8-week training camp, and that 8 weeks was sole purpose to prepare them for selection. We did our metrics to begin with, which I then totally ignored for the remainder of the 8-week camp. We only really retested because it gives us stats as to what we're able to achieve. And then we would implement training. And because I think there was some concern over how maybe the condition that people were coming in because they'd never done it before, because they know that selection was going to be a little bit more in line with how the US had done things before. I think there was this thought process that it was going to be quite challenging and savage for the guys. So we needed to put a big emphasis on the physical. And then the basic skills of learning how to navigate, learning how to shoot, and that was and operate as a team. So those are the modules. So how that started was, they said, right, if we've got a calendar, let's punch in every single day your physical training. So we had 3 groups of around 60, so 3 field teams of 60. And the first one started at 6, and then we did, I think it was 60 or 80 minutes. We started at 90 minutes maybe with them, and we broke that down into whatever it was they needed. So recovery, loaded carries, resistance training, running, and we just mixed the sessions around throughout the week. So it's been a while since I was there, but we'd always do almost like a lift on a Monday, Wednesday. Lift on a Monday, Thursday, loaded march to get the tempo and speed. So that would be quite short distance, maybe 3 to 5K, but at the speed we would need to do for the test event. And then we'd do some running first. So that would always be intervals. We never did any long runs whatsoever, which I know is not the norm for military at all. We never ran over 1K in any one particular interval. And although in their selection process, they had to do 9-mile runs and 8-mile runs, which incidentally they smashed out the park. Then they would do on a Wednesday would be kind of a recovery day. And we might do a little bit of kind of off-feet conditioning, some core and tissue tolerance work, all that sort of stuff, but a big regen day. Thursday was then a resistance day again with a tiny little bit of conditioning top up, some red zone type stuff, which was always pretty savage. And then on the Friday would be the longer ruck march with incremental increases in distance. And we would normally start at the same load. So we were only really changing one variable at a time. And to be honest, I used that format for 3 years. And the format worked because we never ran over a certain distance, because the accumulated volume over the week and what else they did in the training day was giving us the stimulus we needed for them to be able to run 8 and 9 miles, despite the fact they'd never run more than 1K in a single interval effort. In an interval session, they did 4K. And that was the quick guys. So they might do 4 1K efforts with, X amount of rest. But yeah, it just, it seemed to work, and it seemed to injury proof them, and they did really well. So you can get people to where you can get them in 8 weeks. Once they kind of got through selection, they then moved into the qualification course, they call the Q course, which is a bunch of different modules throughout the year. And then they have different assessments throughout that. So things like small unit tactics, things like mountain warfare, things like urban combat. Then they have basic rifle marksmanship, all these different kind of modules and units. And for a lot of those, I would travel around with the guys and just run mobility and training. And that was based on three main parts, really. We're developing something, we're maintaining it, or we're recovering from something. And sometimes the training that they were doing was so savage, we're literally just holding them together with regen and movement prep and development work. So
that's going to be my next question. How often did you have to basically take that plan and throw it out the window? Did that ever happen, or was you always kind of keeping elements of it?
Yeah, it often happened, but what I really did early doors was, once people started to see the value of what we were doing, then they didn't want to change what we were doing. And I was always very clear with everybody, and it's something that I'd advise practitioners to do with their coaches, their sports coaches, is you have the conversations early, and before you start, say, look, what is it you want to achieve? I want to achieve this, 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 this. I want my players to be able to, I need my operators to be able to do this, this, and this. Okay, yeah, no problem. And how important is that for you? That's, 10 out of 10 for importance. Okay, no worries. So we can achieve that. I believe that we can work together and we can achieve that goal. But every time that something crops up, every time that there is a parade that they must attend, every time that there is a discipline issue and you go and flog them and make them run whatever it is they run, and then sit in a caterpillar push-up position for God knows how long, you're impacting what I can give to you. And that is essentially shooting ourselves in the foot, because I'm not able to provide you with the operator you need. If that's something you need to do and you have to do it, then so be it. Just understand that we're not able to give you a 10 out of 10 anymore. Every time we compromise, it's 9, it's 8, it's 7, it's 6. And just so if we're good with that, then that's what it is. And then phone me up and they'd say, look, can we do a 60-minute session, not 90, because of this? Absolutely we can. But if we do this, then we're compromising the outcomes you want. And if you want to, are you happy with that? Oh, no. Anyway, we can squeeze 90 into 60. No, not at all. If you want them to be able to do this in selection and survive and do this and this and this, then this is our plan. And it was just real clarity on that before we got started, and then reminders. And I wouldn't always phrase it like that. It's like, look, we can change, but we're going to be compromising the outcomes. Like, what is there any way we can meet in the middle, or can they do half a session and come back and finish it later? Can we do this? Can we bolt on something here and here and here and here? And once people start to go, oh, okay, yeah, maybe we could do that, the eyes open a little bit, and I tried not to provide too many problems. I just tried to approach it as a bit more solutions. And they kind of responded to that, because they're very solutions focused people. So it would be, how do we get in the training that we need and be able to get the outcomes that you need as well? How do we do that? Well, okay, maybe we can shave off 10 minutes and we can do that in the classroom, and therefore they can stay here for 10 minutes longer. Okay, great. We've just compromised, and you've won 10 minutes and I've not lost 30, I've lost 20. So
that's cool. With like the military, then, this is, I guess it's more of an opinion question here. Like, obviously they have to do some absolute mad shit. Like, what their role is absolutely mental. Well, it's physical and mental, but in terms of what they actually have to put up with, the sleep deprivation, the huge physical workload. Do you feel like, and this is kind of out there, do you feel like you would change the way they train in order to get them more physically ready for the outcome of going to war and doing these missions. Do you think the military approach to, training soldiers is outdated, or do you think it really serves the purpose of what they need to be able to do long term?
Good and big question. I'll caveat anything I'm going to say, which is I'm non-military, so really I don't have any valid opinion. However, I'll give it in the interests of entertainment for the listeners. And what I will say is that we only see what people put out to us and what people tell us. And if you've had a good experience within the military, you will provide positive feedback. If you have been churned and burned, which is highly likely, then you will provide negative feedback. One thing I will say is that no single person leaves the military. I've never known anybody without some sort of physical ailment or disability. But then again, I don't know a single person who's ever played rugby who hasn't left with a single ailment or disability. What the military do really well in the US, for example, is you get compensated for that. So everything that you do have, these really, really detailed medicals, which I think is independently done prior to entering, like hugely detailed. We're talking like 3-5 days worth of actual medicals. And then they will redo that exact same process on exit. And then everything that you check, as in a checkbox that is no longer as it was, that is almost like an extra percentage disability, an extra percentage. We've got people 160% disabled. And because they're just that bashed up, that broken, that was just something that happens. But there is a lot of changes. The US are always leading the way on this with how they train their operators. And there was a massive change and shift from a program called the Thor 3 program, which came in. That absolutely took off. And that was very much a systematic Exos style. In fact, they made the program, or they were heavily involved in the creation of. And they ran the program for a long period of time and were inside their units for a long period of time, and they still are to a certain extent. There's a lot of really great stuff going on, but there's also a lot of off and turbo. They only got 2 switches, Special Forces guys, off and turbo, and that's it. There's a lot of CrossFit, smash yourself, push. There's not enough recovery, regeneration, a lack of understanding towards all these different types of things. Would I change anything? I don't know, because I don't know enough about the system, but they are the best at what they do for a reason. There is massive collateral damage with the operators physically and mentally. If they change something, would they still be as good as they are and to be able to do the things they need to do? I don't know. I can't answer that. But is there a way that we can get a little bit more out of the guys and maybe increase career longevity a little bit? Yes, almost certainly. But that's the same as a rugby player. That's the same as, it's like you can build the perfect training environment off the pitch, but these dudes still going to go and run into each other as fast as they possibly can. You still got a 120 kilo Islander running, and you're going to try and tackle him, and it's still going to hurt. It's still going to break things. So they basically still have to go and do their job. So it's a job and it's a career that breaks you. It's as simple as that.
Apologies for that question, mate. It was a bit of a fucker, but I wanted to hear your answer on it. And I think, you've given a really well-structured answer there in the sense that they've got a job to do regardless of whether we think that there's certain physical things that we can improve. Well, actually, instead of giving them 4 hours sleep, how about we give them 10 hours sleep because it's better for testosterone? Well, yeah, it's just not going to work. I think there's minute things, like you said, that we might be able to improve, but you never know how that may kind of butterfly effect and change the whole system. No, that's cool. What were some of the, I guess, the biggest challenges you faced then in your time with the Special Forces, do you think?
I think some of the biggest things I struggled with. So my job was to create a system, was to year one to create a system, and then over a period of time hand that over to Romanian led, to make it Romanian led. And year one was absolutely fantastic. I loved it because I did everything, and that was easy. That was nice. That was cool. It was such a great job. but then it becomes very difficult when you are handing something over that, firstly, I felt I was really attached to. The other thing was, so over a period of time, so 3.5 years, I had to create coach education training system. And we're talking about, there's a mentality shift that needs to take place both in the military, but also, in a lot of countries. I'm not going to say a lot of countries in the East, that's not fair, but it's certainly in Romania. And that was very much based on wholesale institutional cultural change, which wasn't necessarily on the ground. It was the infrastructure all the way up to the top, not wanting to change or not valuing physical training and high quality diet and rest and recovery, regeneration, etc., etc. So you got these guys that are, these big fat bellies who, they can, with a whisk of a pen, they can make operators' lives significantly better, or they can keep it the same, and they don't understand it, so they just keep it the same. And the system struggles to move forward at the rate that it should and it could, and the rate that the guys on the ground want it to move. So that for me is really difficult. It's the same as the players in a club. The players are like banging on the board. They really they buy into what you're doing, or they want to buy in, but they're not supported by the system. So they say, we want to do HPP, so the high performance program. We want to do that, but where are we going to shower after? Where's our gym? We don't have a gym. We don't have any equipment. We don't have anything. Yet you want us to act and be and do all of these things to the standard you expect. We're not getting supported from the highest end. So when we get that, maybe we'll consider doing what you want. I always found that really difficult, and because of the way in which, so personally, I struggled with, and I don't know if I burnt out actually when I was here. I definitely burnt out before, but maybe a bit more compassionately. You're giving energy or you're taking it, and over there, there's not a lot of energy that the individuals have on the whole, especially in that structure when they get beaten down and they don't have much. They get asked so much, and the only thing that they can really stand firm on is time. So you're asking someone to get in at 7:30 in the morning and their shift starts at 8. No one's turning up 7:30, like nobody. And you're saying to someone your shift finishes at 4, you're damn right they're out the door at 3:45 because they're walking off base at 4. Because every second is worth something to them, because they don't get paid enough and supported enough. So I totally understand that, and I struggled with that. Just it not being a high enough priority, but that stems from the top, really.
I feel like that system that you're kind of outlining there, I think there's so many similarities that I think we probably see in sport as well. And obviously you're talking about something that's greater than sport. You've got your life on the line, and I'm not making that comparison lightly, but I think there's no short of universities, sports clubs where, either the actual practitioners on the ground level or the players or the students just feel like the people at the top are so far removed, to the point where they just don't almost understand. I don't know. I guess another kind of weird question for you. Have you ever been in an institution where you feel like those people at the top, the managers, the people with, the magic pen, do what you feel they could do to make the bottom better?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, well, it's every organization I've been in has those people, every single one, whether that was the EIS, whether that was pro rugby, whether that was pro football in India, whether that was wrestling, boxing in India, and it's, if they don't seek to understand, they're never going to really buy in and truly see what it is you do. But I think we have a role to play in not necessarily helping them to understand, but getting our points across in the right way so that we don't alienate people, but also so that we can express the value of what we're talking about. And we're only talking about it because we care about the athletes and we care about performance. We're not talking about it because we want everybody to love us because we've bargained for an extra day off or half a day or whatever it is. the organizations and the clubs and the people who really truly value player well-being and staff well-being are the ones that A, hold on to their players and staff, and B, often turn to be a success. When you look at clubs like Liverpool, and Jurgen Klopp is just an absolute legend, isn't he? There's all sorts of things flying around Twitter at the moment about that penalty shootout and how he conducted himself, and also his approach towards mentality monsters. And they're creating an environment where people can be open, they can share, they can be vulnerable, they can be strong, they can be weak at times. And there's a system and an environment which is cultivated, that he built that over time. And if you don't have that, then it can become toxic and they can crush it over time. So this is something that's been really, really, really prevalent and clear throughout my career, and anybody listening who will think exactly the same. It's individually dependent. Sometimes it's fantastic and they hang their hat on certain things, and other times, I don't really know, I didn't have that in my day, and he's just being soft. And tricky one.
It's a really tricky one. I think there's never going to be a simple answer to this. And as you're kind of speaking there, it took me back to one of the first roles that I had, and I was on the ground, and I think definitely felt hard done by in terms of some of the decisions that were being made, pay, hours, all the things that essentially made life hard or made my ability to do my job harder. And I think earlier on, I was probably a little bit more forceful with how I kind of approach those situations. And no doubt, I know for a fact the way I approached it was wrong, because walls came up straight away. People got the backup, and then I feel like I've probably done a disservice to everybody that worked with that manager in the future, because now they're having to fight against his perception of what we are as S&C coaches, and the funny thing is, one of my more recent roles, I went in, fresh face, ready to really tackle it with a new, fresh mind. And I encountered a manager who thought that all S&C coaches were essentially what I was like before, because she'd come into contact with somebody that would give her a bit of grief. And, it's not just as simple as yes and no. You've got a lifetime of biases and all those things that are coming into it, and different goals and different pressures. It's mad, mate. Human beings are a difficult breed.
Yeah, we do kind of plant our own seeds as an industry and people. I just think there's so much value in just stopping and observing a little bit, and just talking a little bit less, and trying to sort of seek to understand your environment. And then it can be more powerful when you do talk, because people are more interested in what you have to say. And one of the biggest things I learned, and I've done exactly what you've done, I've always done like these sorts of things and alienated people, rubbed them up the wrong way, etc. And I got taught a lot of hard lessons. One of the biggest things was understanding people's agendas, and understanding the agendas of the players, the manager, the head coach, whatever you want to call them, the other support staff, the state, all the different stakeholders. What do they want? What do they want out of this situation, and how are you going to help them get it? And no one ever got in trouble by listening more. You only get in trouble by talking more. So why do we not listen more? These skills that we're talking about here, they often don't get taught at university, but often people will value a technical skill more than they'll value this. And we're talking about, these are the differences between getting a job and not, and keeping a job and not, and the manager taking you with them for life, and the manager binning you off as soon as they possibly can. So arguably this is equally as important as the X's and O's of conditioning, of strength and power, of velocity-based training. But 9 times out of 10, a practitioner would rather go on a velocity-based training course than go and do a Brett Bartholomew workshop on how to have difficult conversations, or how to put up healthy barriers and not alienate people. So
absolutely, mate, absolutely. With I guess that whole experience then of being out there with the special forces, has it kind of changed your outlook on how you approach S&C for athletes, or has it kind of changed at all, or has it just reaffirmed some of the older things?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned from both India and Romania and Rotherham, they just flowed into each other. I had low resources in every single place, and in the early days I had next to nothing, and they just flowed into each other. It was like a stepwise progression / regression throughout, just up and down. And one thing I learned is that my variables in those situations dictated near enough everything. And I almost had this, like, I would always try to say to people, if you're writing a program, the last thing that should ever go on there is exercises, because it will become really, really crystal clear what you're able to do based on what time you have, what numbers you have, what space you have, what resources you have, what facilities, what equipment, what this. Before you know it, the only option for, horizontal pressing is push-ups. And then your only option with that is loaded push-ups or banded push-ups or isometric, and you think, well, what's the best one of those? Okay, I'll choose that one. Fine. All right, let's do that for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then we'll change it for something else. So these things that was how I programmed. I've learned to program off variables, and I had athletes recently say, oh, I really like this exercise. Oh, okay, cool. Well, we could potentially do something. It was like a kettlebell clean and press or something like that. Okay, all right. So where are you training next week? A hotel gym. Okay, do they have kettlebells? I don't know. Well, if you don't know, then we're not going to do kettlebell clean and press, are we? Because we can't get any continuity whatsoever. So what does hotel have? Well, I think they've got one of those, octopus, like all-in-one machines that just Swiss Army knife of everything, does everything under the sun. Like, well, I tell you what, let's just bring our own Swiss Army knife. Let's just get some bands and let's just focus on that. Oh yeah, okay. The variables just dictate everything, and if you don't, it's trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't go. So that's
Awesome.
something that I massively changed, and then it was, I got a really clear understanding of what people are physically and mentally capable of, and the special forces guys, like they just like to be, they were treated like you would expect in lots of ways. So when they had a little bit of softness, some of them would respond in kind to that, and others would just be like, what's this? This is odd. But ultimately, they were just people, and they wanted to be respected and treated as people. So that was those guys. But I mean, it just makes me think now when I work with some different people, I just think, my God, like, you guys haven't got a clue. You're just so soft. It's, how do we toughen you up? Let's have a little look at doing that, because that's only going to be beneficial for you and your sport. And you have to remember, as you go through your career, you work with these different random groups of people that people think differently. You don't have the same mentality with a boxer as you do with a volleyball player or a rugby player and a football player, and you can't expect the same things. So you need to take your hat off and change, but you can say, you know what, the mentality of some of those guys would be really useful in this environment. Let's see if I can take some of that and put it over there, and then that over there. And that's something that I kind of learned, is that what you can get from each different environment and how to build a pedigree avatar, I suppose.
Being a sponge to all those things, I guess, just building up this massive experience log of good solutions. That's kind of what I'm taking from that.
Yeah, there's solutions. There's at least two solutions to every problem, and some of them might not be very good solutions, but there's still two. Even if you're on the edge of the cliff, someone's got a gun to your head, you can either get shot, you could jump. It's still a choice. So what's the lesser of evils? What's the smallest worthwhile change? What's the most important thing is to have people fit and available and ready to do what they're supposed to do. And that was certainly how I always approached the military side of things. It was, the last negotiation string for me was when someone would say, we need to change training, or we need to cancel training. Okay, so you guys have got to go and do your job. If it's going to be more important for you if this is the only day you can do that, then this is what you go and do. It's as simple as that, because that's probably going to be more important. But this can't be a habit. And then let's keep track of how many times this happens, and let's look at this. Okay, look, this week you cancelled 33% of training, so let's lower our expectations by 33%. Oh no, we can't do that. Well, you can't cancel 33% of training and not do that. Okay, right, well, let's put it back in next week. Well, you can't do that either. We just got to accept that's gone. What we can do is try and mitigate that moving forward, not cancel 33%, because that is going to have a knock-on impact. And these were the things that were quite powerful and almost put the decisions back onto those guys. And in the end, the rule was just like, no one's cancelling any physical training. Simple as that. It just came down from the top. Like, it's never getting cancelled. And that worked quite well in the end.
So I guess very much like an education piece. So I guess just shining a light on their decisions, just like, actually, this is the repercussions of you saying this. It's not even an education thing. Sometimes it's just like, look, you're not thinking about the implications, I guess. Yeah, that's cool. So what?
Just on that, sorry, it's how it's said though, and ensuring that everyone is with you and on the same page right from the off, and then addressing it in the right way, in a non-confrontational way, in a non-aggressive way, and always understanding that, like, I think one of the most important words in communication is control. So you can always control how you say things, your tone, the speed at which you say it, the volume, your body language, whether you continue down a pathway or not, whether you assess what you're saying is resonating or not, whether someone's understanding or not, whether you're getting your message across properly or not. So keep control of those situations by planning it, mapping out how you want the conversation to go, and then assessing throughout that conversation whether that's actually happening or not. Because if it's not happening, the most important thing that you want to avoid is a catastrophic loss of rapport, which I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has experienced at some point. But if we look back at those conversations that really went downhill, at what point could we have put the handbrake on and said, you know what, mate, I think we'll pick this up another day, or all right, I just realized I've got to go and be elsewhere because I don't want to be in this conversation anymore. Whatever it is you need to say, put the handbrake on, and then you can go back and you can reframe it, and you can come at it from a different way. And there's a really good call with one of the digest episodes in the Facebook group with Dan Howes about this exact topic. So really, really interesting stuff.
I listened to that. I listened to that digest episode, and it kind of refers me back to the story I told earlier. I've got this one point in my head, that you wake up at 2 a.m, you think, shit, shouldn't have done that, shouldn't have said that. But it's one of those, isn't it? And I think it definitely, I've learned from it, and I've actually changed the course of some of those future conversations by thinking back to those points. And it comes back to what you said there, control. The only thing I can control is how I do things. How other people kind of soak up that information sometimes is a little bit up in the air, I guess.
It is, depending on your rapport and your relationship, depending on how good your listening skills are, depending on how prepared you are for that conversation, depending on, like, there's so many more things than people think. And if you actually start, and I did this exercise with a group of guys, put control and communication kind of in the center of a page, and think about what you can control within communication. And then you think about both you and the other person. What can you control? And the list is huge. So do a spider chart and actually map it out. It's absolutely massive. And before you know it, you've got an entire page full of information and detail about things you can control. And then you can go about thinking, right, how am I going to control the speed and tempo at which I'm speaking? How am I going to control the tone? What tone is it I need to use at a certain point? How am I going to control my hand gestures? How am I going to influence the space we have between each other if they're becoming agitated? How am I going to back up, pull forward, push harder, back off, do all these different things? And this is all the stuff that Brett Bartholomew's been teaching for years. It's just, I'm not 100% sure whether the community in the world is really ready to embrace it and invest in it yet.
That's awesome, mate. That's awesome. So tell me, what's next for you, mate? What you got planned? What's going on in the future?
So, like I said, at the moment, I'm working with a Formula 3 racing driver with Hinsa. So that's kind of the coaching side of things. Really, really enjoyable experience. It's fantastic. And then the second thing that I'm doing, which is real, I think I've probably found my calling with it really, is performance practitioner wellness and well-being. So I've got a small company called Career Blueprint, And that's fundamentally based on giving practitioners the skills, tools, and resources to take control of their well-being. So I'm defining well-being as happiness, health, and wealth, and that's happiness in terms of health in terms of physical, mental, and emotional, and then it's wealth in terms of wealth of knowledge, experience, positive relationships, good communication skills, and then obviously the financial aspect of that as well. So I operate out of. I don't really operate out of, but I have a Facebook community of about 630 or 40 odd people, and that's just a safe space for people to come and share, upskill, be listened to without judgment, with support. And that's been a really great place. A lot of people come and not a lot of people leave, which is obviously a good sign. And there's quite a lot of engagement in there, and that's all things well-being related. As a company, my goals really are to give practitioners the skills and tools to put their well-being first, because their well-being shouldn't be an afterthought, and the self-care in our industry is typically quite poor. I certainly know that mine was and is at times, and then I have to double down on it and realize that you've got to practice what you preach. We also have this tendency of, our industry has a tendency of burning people out. Our industry has a tendency of crushing us because we give so much of ourselves away to our athletes and to our clubs. We get tied up and entangled in defining our identities by who we work for and what we do, and chasing the rainbow of a better badge and a better club. So that has a massive impact on our wellness, well-being, our relationships. And it's my mission to go about providing skills and education resources to combat those things, I think.
It's just to the listeners that are going to be listening to this, I'd 100% recommend kind of reaching out to Josh and getting in that Facebook group. I think a lot of the resources, the discussions, and kind of the mini podcast digest episodes are really valuable. We've mentioned them twice today that I use on a day-to-day basis. There's key elements there that we need to kind of be understanding a little bit more. There was a discussion, I think you put it in the other day, around what do you feel has been the biggest benefit of this group so far? And my answer, it took me a while to think of it, because I was like, okay, right. And in the end, the thing that I found the most beneficial with this Facebook group was the realization that you're almost not alone in your struggles. That comradeship, that knowledge that other people have been encountering burnout, have had, strings and strings of bad weeks, of it impacting your own mental health, your relationships, and people around you. There will almost not be one person in that group that has not felt those things. And, just reading through the comments that people, put in there, you'll pick up a few little nuggets there. I guarantee it.
There's, in the early days, especially, I was getting anywhere from 3 to 10 messages per day saying, thank you for setting this up. This is so important. And, this has really helped to know that there's other people that are going through all these different things as well. And they can be physical, mental, emotional, and people are just there and sharing and caring without any judgment. And once the ball gets rolling on a conversation, it really does keep going. And that's been great. The tools and resources are very much, I always have quite a large slant towards the career development side of things. And that's because I know how impactful this career can be on our personal lives. And I know that because I've had relationships crushed, because my well-being has been in the gutter, because I've burnt out. And I didn't create a company just because of all these things that I've gone through. I created a company because I realized, it doesn't have to be like this. If I had the skills, tools, and resources, which I am creating, I probably wouldn't have had all these things happen to me. And as a net result of that, I probably A, have a bit more hair, B, have enjoyed my pathway, my community, my journey a little bit more. And I've never had a mentor, so every mistake I've made, I've always made the hard way. When I say I make it the hard way, that's fine. Fail fast, fail forward. But every time I've failed, it leaves a scar, and that leaves some scar tissue, and that generally and gradually starts to grind away, and that can turn into something over time, unless you're able to address those and prevent it turning into scar tissue. So that's what I'm kind of saying to people. You can learn from other people's mistakes. You can get left of these bangs. And I'm saying left of bang is the military term they use for something that happens what happened prior to a firefight or an explosion or a catastrophic event. What were the things that led up to that? And how do we then change our standard operating procedures, our way of doing and being, our training, our mentalities in order to avoid that happening? So these guys are the kings of that, and they're constantly adapting that. But we don't do that enough for ourselves. So what I'm saying is that there's a bang coming for all of us who are listening, or it already has, and that will be burnout. That will be your well-being being kicked in the pants. That will be a relationship going bump. That will be, your own health at the expense, because of the way in which we address our career, and we allow our career to do these things. So my products, one of which is the Reflective Practitioner's Journal. That's a great tool for people. The feedback's been positive for people to check in with themselves, really try and understand what has gone well and not so well on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And not just that, but combine that with the happiness, health, and wealth check-ins on a daily basis, so that you are always keeping your well-being at the forefront of your mind. And then the future products are based around things like career periodization, understanding how to build your own professional pathway to the way that you want it, based off gap analysis, core competencies of the industry, and couple that with the Triple F family fulfillment and finance model, which is all about understanding your values, who you are as a person, and how you can make better career decisions based on things that are really important to you. So all of these things almost combine everything really, and you just kind of you're able to build your own path and really home in on what is going to make you happy in 3, 5, 10 years time, and what's going to fulfill you, so that you can have a career which is full of fulfillment, opportunity, and the finance that you want and deserve. So I guess that's what I'm doing now, really. That's my mission.
It's a big mission, mate. It's a big mission, but I think, we've spoke about this before, but I think it's worth it. I can wholeheartedly get behind that, for longevity in this career that we all love. If you love it so much, let's invest and make sure they're actually doing it for, the rest of our life, or the best part of it. Where can people find out more about, this mission you've got? Where can people find you on social media, Josh?
Yeah, so you can have a look at my website, which would be yourcareer-blueprint.com. And then you can just follow the different links in there. But Instagram would be Career Blueprint, so at Career Blueprint. Twitter is at Coach Blueprint1, because Career Blueprint was taken on Twitter. I don't know who that person is, but get in touch with them. And then the Facebook community as well. So you'll be able to find that on. I'll drop a link into this recording, and that's like I say, that's expanding. Or if you're interested in joining, then just reach out to myself or Jordan, and we can poke you in the right direction.
Awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes below for anybody that wants them. But yeah, I just want to say a big thanks, Josh, to kind of sharing some of your experiences in a really, really, really niche topic. I don't know anybody else that's kind of done strength and conditioning or physical prep in special forces population. And I found that really, really interesting. And I think there'll no doubt be some nuggets there from your experiences that we can all apply to our actual careers as they currently stand. I do really believe that we can find those performance 1% all over the place. You don't just need to speak to other people that work in football. They are all over the place if you kind of just, like you said before, listen more. But yeah, really appreciate your time today, mate. And I will speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, anybody who's tuned in.
Thanks for listening to the Adapt Performance podcast. Let me know what you thought about the episode by leaving a review or sending me a direct message. I'm all for receiving the honest feedback to make sure the episodes grow and get better and better. Like, share, subscribing and following all goes a long way to making sure the podcast reaches the right people. Thanks a lot. Catch you next time.